Hello and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted that we're joined by two guests today, Matt Gibson, who's the Chief Production Officer, and Ramon Lapenta, who's the front-end tech lead for CyberDuck. And CyberDuck are a digital agency based out of the UK, but obviously have people around the world. We work remotely these days. So Matt and Ramon, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about the agency and what you're doing? I see from your website you've got ISO 9241. I always get the numbers the wrong way around. So the clear focus on human-centered design, but tell us more.
Well, thanks for having us, first of all. So I'm Matt. CyberDuck, as you said, are a user-centered design agency. We've got that ISO in human-centered design 9241-210-9241, I think is the full title of it. Catchy. We're based, it's interesting, isn't it, because of the whole remote first thing. So we're based in the UK, in London, but Ramon is in Colorado Springs, and we have people all around the world working for CyberDuck. So we're a remote first company. We focus on user-centered digital transformation. So basically creating accessible and inclusive services for clients right across the spectrum, from public sector for the likes of Sport England and Bank of England and people like that, right through to private sector. So organizations like Compare the Market, for example.
And I'm Ramon. I specialize in the implementation of front-end websites and applications and all of that. And for the past few years, focusing a lot more on accessibility. And happy to be here in this conversation. Thank you for inviting us.
Great. And obviously, public sector, we know public sector has a duty to do this stuff, and therefore you would hope that the public sector clients are asking you, begging you to help them get it right. But how did you come to be working in the space, and how have you seen the market change over time? Because yes, you said you work with public sector, but there's also private sector. I think that I've experienced a significant shift in enthusiasm or interest in accessibility over the last few years. But I'd be interested to see what, from an agency point of view, whether you're seeing the same things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that public sector should want to do it. I think everybody should want to do it. Yeah, I definitely think there's been a shift, like you said, in the last 5-6 years, probably maybe more, since GDS and now CDDO have come about. I think that's really pushed things along in the public sector, the creating of the service standard. And then having assessments around that service standard. I think that keeps people in check and makes that it compels people to actually do things in the right way. The service standard is really about processes, and it makes people follow those processes quite rigorously. So that's, I think, really positive. I think in the private sector, it's lagging behind a little bit. It's quite interesting because I think obviously our background as an agency, 20 years ago, I was making Flash sites, so they weren't very accessible, those sites, but we would always make an accessible version of it. What's probably interesting is actually that accessible version, the HTML version back then with CSS2 or whatever it was at the time, was actually probably better and probably more usable than the Flash one. And so I think that's kind of the direction that we took as an agency. I think one of the things that really did push it along for us as an agency was the advent of responsive design, and really getting into accessibility from that, and thinking about creating services that can be used by anyone, anywhere, on any device, regardless of who you are, what your needs are, really creating services that are inclusive. So I think that was probably one of the, light bulb moments for CyberDuck, the whole responsive design movement.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, we have seen some people deliver accessible Flash websites, and in fact, we amongst our community, we have a couple of fans of Flash, even though it is a fully deprecated technology now. I'm taking the mick a little bit, but essentially the simpler the underpinnings, the closer we can get to using the HTML as the basis for the stuff that we build, usually the more robust it can be, and the easier to be standards compliant. But that doesn't mean that HTML is the be all and end all, because there is still the element of design. So how do you marry up the design concepts with the need to be technically compliant? Because obviously it's not all about the technical side of things. You've got the sort of visual design, the sort of interaction design, and the sort of the usability and the sort of flow processes to take into account too.
Take this one.
Yeah.
I think for the past 2-3 years, probably, I think we have been focusing a lot more on being involved a lot more. I mean, the production part of the implementation team at Cyberdog, we're getting more involved in the design process as well. So from the very start, when we see the requirements of any project, we try to get together and have calls with the design team to see how are we going to approach the design of any project from the start. And that way, we ensure that the designs are not only meeting the client requirement, but they're also being created with accessibility in mind from the very start. And that has helped us massively to not only achieve accessibility at the end of the project, but also to get designers to think with accessibility in mind and design with that mindset from the start.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that we really pushed, I think, in the last few years is making sure we're doing user research and involving people right across the spectrum of disabilities in that research throughout. So from making sure that access needs are part of personas that are being created, part of those user journeys, right through to as you're creating prototypes or designing things that actually you're doing testing with people, again, with a range of disabilities, and working with partners. So we work with RNIB quite a lot, making sure that we're doing the research with the right people, and that we're actually involving the people that are going to be using the service in that research right through that process, and doing things, as Ramon said, doing like audits on the designs that we create, because it's easier and a lot cheaper to fix those things at the design stage than it is to fix them when you're building it.
Matt, I know before we came on air, you talked about the founder of Cyberduck had really sort of stepped away and created Cyberduck because he really wanted to be more human-centered, focused. And I'm curious about a few things. When did Cyberduck start thinking about accessibility, especially when you were sort of created with human design, in mind? Was it because compliance caught your attention, which is generally how people move into the market? So I'm curious about that. But at the same time, what caught my attention about Cyberduck is that not only are you doing it, which I certainly appreciate as part of the community, but you're actually leading conversations and encouraging others to join these conversations. And I know you just recently had an event that was a global event that I was really proud to speak at. Mike Gifford was there from Canada, which we've had on the show before. But why did y'all start, and why do you think it's so important to show leadership? Obviously, you want to be compliant, but I thought it was an interesting point also that Neil made. It's one thing about compliance, but how do you build it in a way that is still innovative, creative, and beautiful, but really built for human beings to use it?
Yeah, so Danny, and he's quite open about this, Danny, our CEO and founder, he worked in Adlan before Cyberduck, sort of right through the dot-com boom and bust. And I think, at that time, Danny wasn't very happy with how things were often done in that sector. I'm sure things have moved on quite a bit since then, but at the time, Danny wanted to create an agency that was more human-centered, user-centered, and have all of these principles that have sort of been enshrined within, user experience design, enshrine all of those in how we work, and create an agency that works in the right way and works for users rather than against them. So that's kind of been part of our ethos and part of our values since we were founded. In terms of accessibility, it's an interesting one, because I would say it's been a journey. We right back then, before mobile was really a thing, I'm talking, over a decade ago now, sort of, way before the iPhone. We were creating WAP versions of websites and things like that. It's been, I think, part of who we are, creating compliant standards based code and things like that from day one. I think where we probably started getting more into accessibility was probably around 2011, 2012, when responsive design came about. And then I think we then started actually taking it a bit more seriously, really understanding the WCAG standards, and I know there's a lot of them. It sometimes feels a bit like Monty Python's Pupils Judea's front, with the amount of standards there are out there right now. But I think that was probably around the time where we started taking it a lot more serious, getting more involved in the community. And then it's just been a journey. The more you do it, the more you want to learn, and the more you want to get better at it. And the more you test with users, the more you empathize, and you want to do things that are good for them. So yeah,
I love that. I love, Matt, you mentioned that date, 2011, because that's when I started at CyberDoc.
Yeah, it all changed when Ramon joined.
I think for me, there's I've always been interested in web standards and all of that from before working at CyberDoc, but also is a matter that's got pretty personal to me. My husband has always been involved with working with people with disabilities in the education system and other places. So I've been really close to that, and I've seen the effects of not doing accessible work firsthand, and I think that's one of the reasons it's been so important to me.
Yeah, I think that's similar for me as well, Ramon. When growing up, when I was a kid, my nan was a wheelchair user. She's passed away now. But seeing the prejudice and just general, I guess, ableism that she faced a lot in her life, I think has probably shaped my outlook on personally. But obviously that brought that into the business. That it's about fairness and making sure that everybody has equal access to things.
Right. And also, I love that Ramon, mentioned, his husband, because we have to look at all these issues from the intersections as well, because, there's so much to do. And I just think it's really important that it be built, in the, in the DNA of your projects. Ramon, you mentioned standards. we all talked about standards a little bit, but there are some people that just think that there's only a couple, but that standards are just stupid and we don't need them, and that, but the reality is, why do y'all think, or do you think that we do need standards? As you mentioned, Matt, it's very complicated. And I know people get real intimidated when they're going to become accessibility experts for a company, and then they go out to WCAG, and it's like, well, it's really easy. All you have to do, and it is easy. It's the sheer volume that starts making it difficult. And I'll just make one more comment. I remember, I've been in this field a long time, but whenever I first started in 2001, and we had updated our 508 law, we were saying, some experts were saying, just don't ever use PDF again. Don't ever use Flash. And I remember Macromedia actually got a little aggravated with me once, saying, are you telling people they can't use Flash? And I said, no, I'm saying if you use Flash, it has to be accessible. And at the beginning, we weren't sure if we could make Flash accessible, but then we figured it out. We adapted, as we do as humans. But I was just curious what y'all think about the standards, only because sometimes there are some voices that say the standards just slow us down and take away our innovation and creativity. And so I was just wondering, what y'all thought about that perspective of the conversation.
I think standards are really helpful. The opposite, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I feel. The standards give you a platform in which you can not only validate what you're building, but have it testable and ensure the quality is a lot easier by following standards. I think I understand the reasoning behind not doing that. But I think for us at CyberDoc in general, if I can speak for everybody, we see that as a challenge, and we like to be creative and do different things with the standards in place. And it is possible. If once you get used to thinking that way, it just becomes second nature. So I think that the standards are always help us to, keep in line with the quality of what we're doing.
Ooh, well said. Well said.
So I agree. But I can also see the tension and the friction with standards. So having spent some time working on the W3C working groups, it's the language that is used is sometimes impenetrable, right? So I often said that it was ironic that as a member of the Cognitive Accessibility Task Force, that the accessibility guidelines are cognitively inaccessible, because it's the way that they're presented that's the issue, not the fact that they exist. So standards are tremendously important, because essentially aside from the sort of the look and feel accessibility, the technical accessibility elements is about interoperability. So if you don't do it right, the technologies just won't work together. And so you're cutting people off by not allowing the tech to work together, and that's where standards are super important. But there is a real problem in the way that they're presented, and the way that it can be difficult for people to understand the requirements of the standards and interpret them and put them into make them real in their products. And I think that there is obviously a recognition of this in terms of people trying to put forward examples. There are code snippets, you've got W3 schools, you've got lots of people teaching stuff. At the same time, there are people going out there sort of creating the mystique. And the problem with the mystique around standards is that it opens up the market for products that are damaging, that enable companies that sell overlays that don't actually fix the code, that don't actually solve the issue, that don't result in standards compliance, being sold as the "this will fix everything for you" solution. And that then creates a dangerous situation, particularly in the US, where there is a culture of litigation. That organizations that, for the best will in the world, want to do the right thing and make their products and services accessible, think we can just pay and this thing will do it all for us.
Right.
And they're opening themselves up to being sued. So I think that whilst the companies that are making those products need to be held to account and to be able to be really clear about what their products can and can't do, because there is still a place for short-term fixes, because as you said, retrofitting accessibility is time-consuming and expensive. So you might want to use an overlay until you fix the code, but go and fix the code. But there's also an onus on the people that are delivering standards to make them comprehensible and digestible, and allow people to understand what it is they need to do in order to do this stuff, so that it doesn't become so scary that you just go and pay for an overlay. I'm not going to name the particular one that has the ire of everyone in the accessibility world, but let's say they were appearing as promoted ads in my Twitter timeline. because they've
Because
got
they got
plenty of money.
$23 million.
Venture capital is
Right, they got
spending a lot.
23 million.
And Ramon, I know you want to comment on this.
Yeah, I think the way I see it, the most damaging part of that whole, topic is having the idea of you don't have to do the work normalized.
Yes.
I think that is very damaging for everybody involved in the industry.
I agree. And also, the investors that invested in this company that we're not naming, they talked to me and I said, what are y'all doing? Why are you investing money in something that is hurting the community of people with disabilities? And now they're going to create their own web, their own, it's, and I don't care. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm happy to be, I appreciate everybody coming in and supporting our community, but that's one reason why we're building Billion Strong, because the community needs to come out and say, when you do like an index, but a company can get 100% on that index and they don't even have to be accessible or hire people with disabilities. That hurts the community of people with disabilities. We've got a problem with that. If you are an overlay that just charges $50, a month, and all these brands think that they're done by just checking these boxes, but it actually is not accessible to people using screen readers and other assistive technology, you are hurting our community. So the reality is the community is going to find a very big global voice and talk about this. And that's one reason at Access Chat why we have been very deliberate about who we have on the show. I mean, for example, we had a group on the show, Text Help, a few weeks ago, and they do not claim that they are overlay tools or that they're going to make you fully accessible, but they're saying, like Neil said, you can put, our product on your website as you work to make it fully accessible and do all the different things you got to do, which CyberDuck does. You follow the standards, you have to code there, you have to test with users that have the things that work. And sorry that they're a process and they can be a pain in the butt, but that's how you assure humans can use it. And so I'm really upset, as are so many people, about what is happening in the United States with that one company that comes from another country, but, only because how could you not care about our community? I don't even understand. Why are you, anyway, I understand the love of the money. So, anyway, it's really sickening to me what's happening, and that our National Federation of the Blind will come out and say, if you are using this tool, we are coming after you. So now they're going to come after the customers of this tool, and this tool is hurting other groups that are really trying to do the right thing. Anyway, okay, obviously you can see I'm upset about this, so I'm going to shut up, but it's just, I don't understand why we all can't work together and celebrate each other. I mean, once again, let's celebrate CyberDuck wanting to make sure that what you create and build is accessible to everyone, all of the communities. Why would you want to build anything that wasn't accessible to all customers? Why? I mean, that's not good design. So anyway.
I share your feelings about that overlay. I think it's really dangerous what they're doing. Partly because of what Ramon said, that it teaches laziness. It teaches people not to bother to do the hard work to learn and to understand actually how to make accessible products. But it also teaches things that, like, we've looked into that specific one that you're talking about, and things that it does aren't accessible. And so, like you said, it's a massive missed opportunity on their part, not involving the community in the development of their product. I think Neil's right, what you were saying before about the fact that there is a learning curve, and it can, in certain parts of the WCAG, it can be quite a steep learning curve as well. And I think that's definitely something that I think probably needs to be addressed in the future, making it more penetrable and more accessible in itself, and more comprehensible. What I think we do internally is we have our own version of the checklist, which is, again, putting it in a language that designers and developers within CyberDuck can understand, rather than going, obviously they can still go to WCAG and go through the full resource, but it's making it a little bit more accessible and understandable for people who are perhaps more, in some roles within the company who aren't actually building products, but it's really important that they understand accessibility. So people working within marketing and things like that, they still understand it, they still understand the principles. But like you said, the sort of incomprehensibility of some of that language leads to then, me and Ramon are part of a number of communities, and you should see the discussions that go on in those communities, because somebody could share, an innocuous challenge sometimes, and the discussion of how to deal with that challenge, you will have people arguing that, the grass is blue and the sky is red, sort of thing.
Completely opposite sides.
Join the standards boards conversations. I was a part of the cognitive one early on, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. This is going to drive my ADH crazy. So Neil stayed with it, but I was like, yeah, I don't think y'all need me. So it's like, wow. Yeah. But, thank goodness for all these leaders that do these standards, that because it's a big deal, but at the same time, we all have to agree to what we're doing here. I mean, at some point, if you don't have standards, how do we know if we're done? And I understand we still are struggling with that, but I just really wanted to have y'all on Access Chat because I appreciate the leadership that you're showing. I want other, design agencies to show this kind of leadership, and we are seeing it, but I still don't think we're seeing it enough. It still feels like often it's an afterthought. I don't know if y'all agree with that, but so and that's why I was impressed that CyberDuck was really stepping up and not only making it making sure that this happened with all the work you're doing, but you're encouraging others to do it, including your partners, the vendors you're using, and supporting your clients. So that to me is leadership that we want to applaud. We want to applaud because some groups aren't doing that, and we already went there, so I won't go there again. But so that was one reason why I wanted to invite you, because I really appreciate the leadership that your smaller agency, but still global agency is doing. So I think you mentioned what you have about 85 people all over the world. So I just think it's a very important part of the conversation. And until we do that, just like until we got the universities involved, we're not going to solve all the problems. Just like, once again, Billion Strong, if we don't get the community to get together and to find our voices collectively globally, then there will be companies and investors that do what's happening in the United States. We will, for example, not make, getting COVID-19 vaccinations for people that are more vulnerable. There's a lot of work to do, but it's going to take all of us. And I just wanted to say I appreciate that. But I know we're almost at the end. And Neil, we want to thank our sponsors, but also Matt and Ramon, let's before we do that, I'd love to just give you the final words of why did y'all think that this was good for business? Why? I mean, once again, you talked about it a little bit, and also to make sure if you would say on camera, how people can get to CyberDuck and your social media accounts and stuff.
Sure. I think it's good for business because it is good for business, demonstrably so, in that, 1 in 5 people in the UK, and as have disabilities, but also, as you know, with the Billion Strong thing, that 1 billion people worldwide have disabilities. So there's a business case to be made for making things accessible, but it's also not just a business case, it's the right thing to do. I mean, obviously with public sector things, some of the services that we design, it's literally a matter of life and death if you don't make those things accessible and inclusive. So, I don't think any designer wants to have that on their conscience when they're creating products. So, yes, there is a business case for it, but I think it's just the right thing to do. So, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
It's just the right thing to do. Here in the United States, there is over 60 million people that live with disabilities. So apart from the business side, excluding all of those people just because it just doesn't make any sense. So
Great.
Yeah, we're happy. We're happy to be part of it.
And I love it when companies go, you know what, we don't care about the business case, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, because that's even better, because you'll make the money anyway. It's going to come to you. So that's fantastic. And I need to thank the other companies that have recognized it's the right thing to do and continue to support us over the years. So Barclays Access, Microlink, and MyClearText for keeping the lights on, keeping us captioned. So thank you guys.
Before we go,
yeah.
what is the CyberDuck website?
Oh, apologies. Yeah, it's www. I don't know why we say that still these days. Cyber cyber-duck.co.uk, DUCK. And then on social, on Twitter, we're CyberDuck UK.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look forward to you joining us on Twitter.
Yes, thank you both.
Oh, absolute pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us.